Good morning, everyone. So don't worry, I'm not going to be speaking this morning. We've actually have an amazing keynote speaker to get us started today. But I am going to be the MC for the event this week. So you will be seeing me up here quite a bit. When Dave and I were planning out the content for this year's event, we wanted to make sure that we were taking a different approach. Every year, we've made sure to focus very heavily on customer success and ensuring that you all were getting the best in trends and insights and really assessing what the future would look like for our industry. But we thought, we've got an opportunity here. We've got a room of amazing leaders who are also seeking professional and personal growth. So a lot of the content that we're going to be sharing this week is not only focused on customer success, but also on growing each of you as professionals. And so our keynote speaker today, a little different than last year if you were able to attend, is Tessa White, the job doctor. Now, if you're not familiar with Tessa, she is the author of Unspoken Truths for Career Success. She's got millions of followers on social media. She's made appearances and is frequently on Good Morning America, News Nation, and is featured in the Wall Street Journal. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Ms. Tessa White.
If your job is on life support, you need the job doctor. My brain is a walking database.
You know you've made it when you have your own walk-up music. Now, I don't know what kind of fly-by-night operation this is that decided that a keynote speaker needed to be an HR person, but apparently that's what you get. Yeah. Yes, thank you. Not only am I an HR person, I'm a boomer. So how am I supposed to talk to you about the modern workplace? Let me see if I can give you a little bit of confidence. Well, as a boomer, I guess I'm technically Gen X, barely by a year. But as Gen X, I grew up at a time when we were told not to get in a car with strangers. And literally in today's world, we get in a car with strangers. So the world has shifted. It's very different. I took a job, and it wasn't maybe the job I wanted, but it's the job I got, and you were supposed to suck it up. I had 3 children, and I took 6 weeks off for one. I took 2 weeks off for the other. That's as much time as I could take off. And it was a very different time to be a Gen X in the work world compared to now. My daughter is a nomad. I have 6 children. Most of those are Gen X. And my daughter's a nomad. She works from anywhere. She will work from a beach. She will work from Australia. She works from a fishing boat. And, one day I said to her, I'm the job doctor. I help people with their careers and I help them navigate. You're not working as much as I think you should be. And she said, we have unlimited PTO. And I go, wait a minute. Unlimited PTO does not mean unlimited PTO. You realize that's just a trick, right? That's a trick that we in HR say is unlimited so that we don't have to accrue your time off on the books, but it doesn't mean you can take as much time off as you want. She goes, no, it's unlimited. Her boss called and set a meeting on her calendar, and she called me. She goes, what is this about? I said, well, if I'm you, I'm gonna get ready for a hard discussion with my boss. She goes, I'm a little nervous. I said, call me. Call me as soon as it's done, I'll be there for you. She called me after, and I told my husband, she's getting fired. She's getting fired. She's taken too much time off. She called me and she goes, I got a promotion. I just got promoted. So this is the world that we're living in today. And it's very different from the world that used to be, and I can see I've got all kinds of ages here. But we're going to talk about the modern workplace. Now, my last corporate job, I worked for a local company that was all millennial and Gen Z. It was like 4,000 flat-brimmed hats and door knockers and about 10 adults in the room. That's what it was like to work at this company. And I learned to have a very healthy appreciation for the younger workforce, and I saw some of the shifts and some of the changes that were happening. In 2019, I left that job, and I thought I was going to retire. And then the pandemic hit. And if there's one thing you don't do to me is lock me in a house. And so I started a website, and I said, I'm going to call myself the Job Doctor. And my daughter said, hey, Mom, let me post you on TikTok. Your videos are really good. I said, I can't even navigate it, don't know how to log on. Sure, knock yourself out. So she put me on TikTok. 3 days later, I got a call from my son in California. He said, Mom, my girlfriend said she saw you on her For You page on TikTok. Is that even possible? And I said, oh my gosh, I completely forgot. We posted some videos on TikTok. I went back, I looked, I had 10,000 followers in 3 days. And I average about 1,000 followers a day now. And so I have over 1 million followers. And I talk about the modern workplace. And I help people with career navigation, help them navigate politics and power and all of the difficult things in the workplace that really hurt your engagement and your ability to just want to be there. And I also help companies become friends and partners with their people again. So I want to talk to you today about what's happening because the sands are shifting, and you know this. It's a different world, and the way that you need to lead is so different today than it was 5 years ago, even 3 years ago. I want to teach you what you need to know. I get calls every day from industries across the nation, big companies, small companies, CEOs, individual contributors. And so let me tell you what's happening and see if I can give you some help to lead your people, but also some personal help for your own career. We're going to look at both of those. So this chart is kind of an idea of what's happening right now. And if you look at it, the baby boomers, we were just, I'm going to suck it up or die trying. I'm just going to give everything to the altar of work. But if you fast forward, I call Gen Z the bye-bye generation. I asked my followers, if something was not right at work or you didn't like how things were going, what's your likelihood you would bring it up to your manager? 94%, this is tens of thousands of people, said, I would leave before I would bring it up. And I said, really? Help me understand why. They said, I shouldn't have to write the script for my employer. I find that really interesting because in relationships, personal relationships, could you ever tell a partner, hey, too bad you didn't read my mind, you're out of here. And yet people today are really reticent to be able to bring these things up and very concerned about how to do it. People are concerned about the power dynamic, and they also are seeking, I call it the green zone. They're always chasing the green zone instead of staying through red zones, which is a whole different topic. But there is also a shift from long-term to short-term thinking, and it will affect the way you teach and the way that you mentor and the way you lead your people. And if you don't make the adjustment and you're stuck in a top-down leadership model, you're going to lose your people. In fact, you've already lost the battle. So let me teach you how to bend the curve on loyalty. This is going to be more of a discussion. In fact, at the end, I want Q&A. So keep your questions so that we can talk about them. Here's something that's really interesting about the trends that are happening. This idea of going from long-term to short-term thinking. If you look at the average amount of time people spent in jobs, it's going down and down and down. And although I understand the data's a little skewed because a Gen Z is going to naturally have shorter jobs, experts are predicting that a Gen Z worker will have 25 to 30 jobs in their lifetime. And this is held true by every Gen Z that I talk to. There's something happening right now, some of you may know of it, called job stacking. At least that's what I call it. Job stacking. And a lot of Gen Z are actually stacking multiple full-time jobs on top of another. I find it fascinating when I ask managers what they think of this. The younger they are, the more they say, absolutely, fine with me as long as they get their work done. The older I go, the more they say, are you kidding? That's cheating the employer. But it's just to help you understand what's happening. A Gen Z is likely to have multiple gig jobs and be very comfortable. In my time, that was called somebody that was unemployable. We didn't dare have lots of contract work, but they're not afraid of doing that. And so if you expect as an employer to keep your people and not continually be churning, and replacing them. You need to understand the mindset and what's happening. So let's look. Here's a longer chart. If you go back to a boomer, especially older boomers, had lifetime jobs. They didn't change jobs very often. Everything was about retirement. There was one path, right? We work hard, then we retire, we have everything we need, and there were not a lot of variations in that thinking. But the further we go into new generations, the more people say, no, there's multiple paths. I can do whatever I want. I can create the job I want. I can have multiple jobs at once. I can do different gig jobs, and that feels safe to me. You know, and if you go back further, you'll see also there was savings, there was stability. But if you go to a Gen Z, we know that they're lucky to have $200 in their savings account. And when that's the case, then it's like, what do I have to lose by doing what I want and chasing my dream? If you go back, a house was number one. Retirement, we used to offer pensions. Remember that word? Pensions. Then you go further, you come further towards today and you get 401ks. Then you go further again, you get stock options. Now it's, when's my next raise? And it better not be a year from now or I'm leaving. So you can see that the time horizon has been compressed, incredibly compressed for these, and that there's a real desire for, what have you done for me lately, short-term thinking. So if you think about benefits or a value proposition that employers have to give in order to keep people, instead of short-term disability, long-term disability, 401k, vesting of 4 years for equity, that's very Gen X. And companies are needing to adjust now. The companies that are adjusting are the companies that are offering, hey, I'm going to help you offset your rent, or I'm going to help you make a car payment while you work for me. I'm going to help you with that. I'm going to send you on a trip. I'm going to send you somewhere where you can have it's called the experience economy, where you can post pictures and have that moment of greatness because you don't know what tomorrow brings. And companies that aren't adjusting to this and still offering the old version of what people want doesn't work. Also consider that customization's everything. If you watch the rise of Nike shoes and customization, you'll know that this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And when you take that's a whole class I teach on customization and choose your own adventure. If you're not having a choose your own adventure for your employees, you're also going to lose them because your employees want to work when they want to work where they want. Your employees want to be able to customize their experience. And if you're not doing that for them, again, you've already lost the battle. So what would I do? Here, if I could create companies for you that I think would work, and I come up with some things I think you need to do as leaders to help bend the curve on loyalty, here's the things I would do. Number one, I would redesign my workplace with customization, and I would ask my employees, what do they want? And I would allow for part-time, full-time contract work instead of just one option for them. Automatically, that's a huge, huge plus for you as a leader. I would offer customizations in terms of career paths. And in fact, it used to be that HR was responsible for the career path discussion, and maybe you had it once a year. If you're having it once a year, your people are already looking, because a Gen Z is looking on day one for their next job. So it's incredibly important that I would say on day one, but at least by day 30, you're talking to your people about what do they want to be, how do they want to grow. And your company doesn't have to be a huge company, and you don't have to have a career path to offer them necessarily. What you do have to know is where they want to go and paint the picture of how you can build the skill sets they need to get there. So even if your company is small, you say, you want to be an entrepreneur someday? Here's what you're going to need to know. You're going to need to know something about operations. I'm going to help you build that skill set so that you can move up and you can do those things. In fact, at one of the companies I was at, what we ended up doing was teaching. We knew people were going to leave, so we said, let us teach you to be your own business leader, so that when you leave our company and you go start your own business, you have the skill set to do so. Don't be afraid of that because it's already happening. The other thing is shorten your raise cycles. If you're waiting a year to give people a raise, that is such a mistake. And I understand cost envelope. I'm a business leader. I understand you can't go outside of the cost envelope, but there are so many things that you can do to help your people get more increases smaller at different spurts, at different stages along the way. A company that I worked with, we decided that it was a college town. Everybody was trying to get the same talent. How are we going to keep them? If next door they're offering $17.50 and we're offering $17, we're going to lose people all day long. And it was just a war about the 25-cent raises. So what we did is we took the cost envelope. We said, what does that person need to do to be successful? And then we said, you can earn between $15 an hour and $22 an hour to work here. Every month it's going to reset based on how well you did. So if you decide one month, I'm not into this plan, I just want to earn the low end, great, knock yourself out. But the people that actually knocked it out of the park could earn $22 an hour. Our competitors couldn't touch them. And we used the exact same cost envelope as the annual increases. We spent the same amount of money and our retention went up double digits. So you have to think like that if you want to keep your people. How can I align them to the results I need, and how can I reward them sooner, quicker, faster? The other thing is you've got to create shared ownership when you can. And I know that sounds kind of trite, but any opportunity that you have to share in the wealth of when we succeed, you succeed, that's a big deal. Because what people are doing now is saying, look at the car industry. I'm out. You're not paying me enough. CEOs are making $40 million a year, and you're doing it on the backs of people, and I'm out of here. So people don't want to be a part of something unless they win when you win. So you need to think about, how can I create something where my people can win when we win? Because you're mimicking ownership. You don't necessarily have to have a stock option or a 4-year vest. But when you mimic ownership through profit sharing or through aligning their goals and they get more, you're going to also bend the curve on loyalty with your people. So those are a few things that I would do that I think are really important for you to consider, especially in your industry. Now I want to talk about, what are the stages of career growth? What are the skill sets you need to be teaching your people? And also, I want you to look at this from a perspective of you as well, because this is relevant to everybody. I stumbled on the 5 stages of career growth when I was saying, how can we hire people in a company? We're so excited that they come, and then 6 months later, a bunch of them wash out, and we have to fire them. Are we really that bad at hiring people? And it drove me crazy. So I was looking at all the data and trying to bring it together. Couldn't figure it out. For years, I couldn't figure it out until one day I said, I need to do training, new hire training for people. But I don't think the training is the same for entry-level people as it is for senior people. And all of a sudden, just something clicked, and I went, oh my gosh, level of career has everything to do with it. And I correlated the data. Here's what's crazy. The people that we were firing, we were firing because they didn't have the skill set that the same people at each stage of growth, the ones that were doing well, had that skill set. There was a direct correlation. I went, oh my gosh, there it is, the 5 stages of career growth. So let me give you a summary of this, kind of try and picture where you are in it, and then let's talk about what you need to make sure your people are learning at each stage. So, stage number 1, doers. You get in the company, here's what's going to surprise you. Crap runs downhill. Your first job, you think companies are organized, and they are not. In fact, the lower level you are in a company, and you go in, you're like, how does this company even survive? Because the processes and everything are very broken at that entry level for the most part. And they're the last things to get fixed. When you go into a new company, your job, you're dependent on your manager. You're dependent, and you're asking, what do I do, manager? What do you want me to do next? This is the one place in your career you get carte blanche questions answered. You can just ask questions, and you should be asking questions so that you understand your boundaries. People that get fired in a stage 1 are people who don't know what the PTO policies are. They don't know if you can show up late or not show up late without consequence. They don't understand the rules of the road. On this stage, if you do it better or faster than somebody else, you win. And you win the most when you check in with your manager. Your manager doesn't know your capabilities at stage 1. And so when you tell your manager, hey, I did that thing you asked me to do, it sounds very elementary to people, but you have to tell them because they don't know if you're following through. And your ability to say, I did that thing, what do you want next, is how you win. Now, ironically, when you go to a stage 2, I call this the gateway stage. At stage 2, you have to be independent. So your manager is telling you broad deliverables, and you have to figure out the in-between. If you keep asking questions, what do you want me to do next? You will fail. So there's an evolution that takes place in a stage 2. Stage 2 is all about this introduction to, can I get results? How do I work out the in-between? And one of the common mistakes people make in a stage 2 is they think on their first project, they're like, oh, I know how I'll do this. I'm going to manage this project, and everybody's going to do what I asked them to do in the time frame I've asked them to do, and it'll all work out. And guess what? Nobody ever does what you ask them to do the first time the way you ask them to do it. And so that's the rookie mistake that a lot of people make in a stage 2. Stage 2 is probably where you learn the most and you make the most mistakes. And it's okay. So when I left all the pay information for the whole company on the copy machine. We had copy machines back then. In a stage 2. I thought I was going to get fired. Probably should have. That's when you test yourself. You're always testing. But a stage 3 is really interesting because just as you get independent and you think I've got this figured out, you move to a stage 3. And if you are independent in a stage 3, you will fail. This is where you are interdependent and you have to start working with other departments. You can't know all the answers. So if you're middle stage in your career right now and you think you have all the answers and you never ask questions, you don't go to the outside, you're going to be in trouble. You have to hire people that are smarter than you. You have to be able to augment your knowledge with other knowledge. And I think it's interesting that I've sat through dozens of promotion meetings where we get the managers together and decide who's going to get promoted in a company that year. And the number one reason that people are not promoted, it looks like this. The manager says, this person's incredible, they do amazing things, and then someone inevitably raises their hand and says, well, they sound great, but I don't know who they are. I've never worked with them. It's the number one reason promotions are turned down. And this goes back to interdependence. If you're not working well with other departments at this stage, you will stall out. This is also the first stage when you all of a sudden have conflict emerging as a regular part of your job. Now, conflict exists from the day one. Conflict exists when you get the job offer, you don't know whether you should negotiate it or not. So it exists all the way along the way, but when you get to this stage 3, conflict, and you not wanting conflict will actually be a fatal flaw for your career. And people think that if I get along with everybody and I'm nice all the time, that's what's going to get me ahead. It actually does not. Now, I'm not suggesting that you fight with everybody either, but you have to learn how to have good conflict, because you're fighting for budgets and resources constantly. Stage 3, how many, raise your hand if you're a stage 3. Any stage 3 in here? I'm guessing most of you are higher. Great, there's a few of you. Stage 3 is the hardest job in a company because this is where mid-managers live. And mid-managers, sorry, I'm just gonna tell you right now, I'm sorry your job sucks. Because mid-managers are in what I call a mid-manager sandwich. They have the leaders above them saying, drive this initiative down the line to your people, and the people are saying, that is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. And you're stuck in the middle. And you also don't want to be at a mid-manager, you're like, I don't want to be one of them, the out-of-touch senior people. You want to be considered one of the people. And so it becomes very, very difficult to be a mid-manager and understand how you balance that out and how you represent the company without losing sight of what people need. So there's a lot of conflict there. Stage 4. How many of you are stage 4, director or above? Great. How many of you are stage 5, meaning you're a senior VP or on your executive team? Okay, so most of you are stage 4. You will understand then that being a stage 4 is not all it's cracked up to be. You think Great, I'm a director, I've made it, or I'm a VP, I've made it. You have not made it, have you? You are fighting for relevancy every single day, every single minute, and it feels like you're a broken record because you're fighting for resources over and over and over again. Not only are you fighting for resources, you're fighting for the money that comes with it. And so this is the first place that conflict shows up in a big way. And if you don't know how to have it the right way, and you don't fight for the resources you need, you won't get the people you need, and you will wash out of a company. And so this is a really hard stage to be in. This is where conflict is just on all the time, and you're a broken record all the time, because you're always telling your senior leaders, this is what we're trying to achieve. These are our objectives over and over again. It just feels like nobody ever listens. It's a very hard place to be. Stage 5, interesting. When you get to a C-suite role, you got there because you made decisions, and you generally made pretty good decisions. But the downside is you sometimes start making decisions too quickly, and you don't listen to the people, the ecosystem. You listen to maybe your executive team, but you don't go down in the organization. And the other thing is people are afraid of you. And by that I mean they're afraid of you. They're at least afraid to disappoint you. And so it's really difficult, and you have to be very cognizant not to create yes men and yes women so that you can get to the truth of the situation when you're in that role. And if you're not careful, you'll make decisions too quickly without the data that you need, and then you'll make the wrong decisions. And in another cruel twist of irony, remember in the very beginning you were dependent on other people? On a stage 5, you think, I've got all the independence in the world. You don't. Because at a stage 5, you should be asking your people, what do I need to know? What are you going, if you have a team, what is it that the objective should be for your organization? My CEO would come to me all the time and say, what do we need to do in HR? What needs to happen? He would never dare say, I'm going to tell you what needs to happen in HR. So you kind of go full circle. So these are the stages, and I want to just spend a little bit of time, recognize which stage is yours, and we'll talk about it for a bit. It looks like a lot of stage 4, so I'll try and get my comments to help point you towards what you need, but also think about your own people and what they need. So let's talk about early stage for a minute. Oh, big lesson. This is the lesson in an early stage career. Working hard is not the same as adding value, is it? In fact, I will take a hard enough worker all day long that knows how to prioritize and work on the right things than I will take a really hard worker who works on the wrong things. And the trick at this stage is that you have a job description, which, by the way, was written by an HR person in a dark corner of their office right before they went home and they had to post that job for you. It is not steeped in reality usually, or if you're lucky, a consultant helped craft some sort of framework for you, but the job description on paper is not the same as the job, the real job. And your job in an early stage career is to figure out the difference between the real job and the job on paper. One of the things that I recommend everybody does when they start a new job, and this would be for your level as well, go sit down with your constituents, cross-department, anybody that works with your department, and say, what do you really expect out of this job? What's important that we deliver for you? What's worked in the past and what hasn't worked in the past? And that will help you understand what the real priorities are. And they'll be different than what you were told they were when you were first hired. It's really important that people understand this concept of playing in the gap. So companies, when we're interviewing with them, they tell us they're wonderful, right? And if I use the analogy of the houses, they say, it is a gleaming mansion that you're working at. We have a beautiful pool and music and barbecues every day. And the house is designed in an architectural digest. I mean, this is top notch. And when you actually go to the company, you find out it's a dilapidated mansion. The door doesn't open and it creaks. You go inside, the furniture doesn't exist yet, and you go out to the pool and it's a blow-up pool from Walmart and they're serving cold hot dogs. Companies are aspirational and they tell us where they want to be. And your job, if you want to be most successful in a company, is to understand how to play in the gap, how to get a company from what it wants to be versus what it is. And that requires you to be really astute at understanding what the real requirements of the job are. So I had a gentleman named Josh. I hired him when I worked at Vivint Solar. Vivint Solar had door-to-door salespeople, and HR couldn't touch recruiting. They didn't want us in it at all. But in one of our investor calls, the CEO said we're going to have to increase our recruiting by 25% in our sales team because we had over 100% turnover on door knockers. We need more of them. And they couldn't do it alone. So I hired Josh. He was a gentleman who helped B-list movie stars succeed. He was not a recruiter. He was a guy you hired if your movie career had gone to tank, and he helped you through social media be popular again. Strange hire, right? But I knew that Josh had to think differently in order to make this work. So Josh went to the sales leader and he said, I want to help you be successful. Let me help you be successful. And the sales leader said, you can't recruit for me. There is no way you can recruit. I can tell you what the job is, but you don't have to knock doors. You don't know what it takes to be successful. Stay away from people. You just stay away from us. And he said, well, tell me how you recruit. I'd like to just understand. And he said, I talk from experience. I can tell them what it's like to recruit, and I can close every person that comes to me. I can close. So salespeople would recruit their own people, but they did it one at a time. Now, I think any normal person would have, I think a very normal person would have gone back and said, I don't want this job. This job sucks. You hired me to be a recruiter. I have a little team of people that are supposed to find leads for the salespeople, and they don't even want to talk to us, let alone have us interact with them in any way. But Josh kept at it. And here's one of the keys to playing in the gap. You have to understand and ask a lot of questions to find out what the true need is and find that vein of gold. So Josh figured out pretty quick the way that he was going to win was to find people and give them to the salesperson to close, but he couldn't do it one at a time because we could never hit our uplift goals of 25% by doing that. So Josh started putting on events. He would hire sports professionals to come and talk. He'd get all the other salespeople to come. He had giant Jenga towers. He had prizes galore, and he would advertise these amazing events that were just like over the top. He would fill the room with potential recruits, and then the sales leader would sit in front of 40 people at a time instead of one at a time and could sell the opportunity. And with the energy in the room and the music and the people, it just created excitement. And all of a sudden, Josh was successful. Sales loved him. In fact, so much they said, we don't want him in HR, bring him over to sales, which was the ultimate compliment from somebody who hated HR people. So Josh was able to fill the room, and we were able to meet that 25% uplift goal only because Josh understood that the real job was something different than he was hired for. And every big promotion I've ever gotten in my whole career is because I did that. My first big job was Covey Leadership Center. I got to work for Stephen Covey, which was really cool. And I was in HR, and I realized that we did not have an affirmative action plan back then. Nobody even knew what it was. And I went, hey, I just stumbled on this thing we're supposed to be doing, and I don't know anything about it, but it feels pretty important. Do you care if I take that? And they said, go for it, take it. So I became the expert on affirmative action with no training whatsoever. Started doing the numbers and putting together the plan, and I put together this plan, submitted it to the executive team, we talked about it, and I am not kidding you. It was not more than a month after I did that we got a call from the EEOC who said, you're being audited on your affirmative action plan. they're like, I don't know what this means. I didn't know what it means, but they came in. We did not have one write-up, not one fine, nothing. And I became the hero of the company because I played in the gap. I understood what the company needed. I played in that space, and I became the go-to person. You become a go-to person in the company when you understand what the company needs to get where it is today versus where it needs to go. That's how you become a go-to person. So if you teach your people that, and you also personally understand that that's the most important thing is results and measuring results, and by the way, if you're not measuring results in numbers, that is the language of the business, and that's a key part of your storytelling. For you to get promoted is you have to tell the right story. If you don't have a dashboard, you don't have metrics you're measuring, go leave this today and go figure out what those metrics are so you can tell the story about your performance through your metrics and through your performance. So mid-stage, lesson is this. If you can't get comfortable with conflict, it's going to act as a career flaw. Jeremy was my right-hand man. He came to me and he told me I was a micromanager and I sucked. Now, how many of you would be comfortable telling your manager that you hate them? Very few. The power dynamic's really difficult, but what Jeremy did is he said, it's the way he said it. And this is why understanding how to deal with conflict is so important, because things go bad when you assume bad intent in another person. Things go well if you assume good intent in another person. Listen to how he addressed it. Tessa, I really want to talk to you. There's something that I would want to know if the shoe were on the other foot and I were in your role. Would you mind if I have an honest conversation? Sure, you have my attention. Let's talk. Then he said, Tessa, I've noticed that you're really creative and you love rolling out things that are really good. Right? We always have a good reputation in our department for being creative and doing out-of-the-box things really well. When you ask your team to do something, however, and they come back to you, you keep changing it to try and tweak it to get it right where you want it. But what's happening is your team members are not able to use their own creativity, and they're getting afraid. And they're afraid that their work is going to have to be redone again and that you're not going to like it. So now they're waiting on you to define it. And you're never going to get a product better than that that's in your brain unless you're able to work with your people and listen to what they have to offer. So they experience you as a micromanager. What they would expect is that you put the project in front of them and give them some leeway to show their own creativity and why you hired them, all the skills that you hired them, and to make less adjustments and changes along the way. And then he closed with this. He said, he said, is that what you intended? Is that what you intended? Of course it's not what I intended. And we were able to have a really rich discussion about things. There are 3 questions that are magical, and I want to teach these to you because you're going to have to talk with your people. You're all senior leaders, and you're all managing and leading people. Whether it's your own department or somebody else, is that what you intended? Is there something missing I don't understand, or do you see it differently? Those magic questions leave room for interpretation, and they create partnership. They assume good intent. They are the most important questions that you can ask in your career, and as a mid-stage career where this is happening all the time, you can have really difficult conversations if you have them in a safe way. And a safe way means that you leave room for interpretation. So you can describe the problem, but saying, is that what you intended, is very powerful, and it will allow that conversation to continue and for you to have great dialogue with your people. Rather than saying, hey, Joe, did you forget to set your alarm clock again? As a passive-aggressive way to say somebody's late all the time. Hey, Joe, I noticed you've been late 3 times this week, and we've talked about it once before. I would expect you to be on time each day. Is there something going on I don't understand? I bring up that because that's a real-life experience, and in that particular case, that employee's mother had passed away. I had no idea. And he was trying to put together a funeral and do a lot of difficult things for his family. So, hey, Joe, did you forget to set your alarm clock again? Do you think that helped him? No way. So that is the mid-level career thing that I want you to understand. Honesty builds trust. Honesty builds trust. And you can have hard conversations when you assume good intent in the other person. The last one, this is a senior stage lesson, so this applies to every single one of you. You don't know the truth. You simply don't know the truth, A, because people are afraid of you, we've already talked about that, and B, you don't know the truth because by nature, we hate conflict. When you hate conflict, what happens is we have halfway conversations, I call them. We'll talk about that in a minute. And we don't necessarily get to the truth. How do I know this is the case? Well, this is why. Managers will come to me and they'll say, I need to let go of Susan. And I say, every time I'll say, does Susan know it's coming? And they say, oh yeah, Susan definitely knows it's coming. And what I know for sure is Susan does not know it's coming. And I have fired thousands of people. Susan doesn't know it's coming. We have an aversion to conflict. And so if we're not good at having direct conversations, we get into trouble. I was in the room when the CEO was fired. Very interesting. Came in for a 7:30 a.m. meeting. And at 7:30, I was meeting with Blackstone. And me and the CEO thought we were doing a stock option exercise. 5 minutes later, the CEO was escorted out of the building. He had been fired. And in that moment, I thought, oh my gosh, the CEO is genuinely surprised that he's fired. How is that? I mean, we didn't talk about the CEO and, as a team, but I knew that there were shortcomings. We all knew it. But he was genuinely surprised. 5 minutes later, I was escorted in to meet the new CEO. And I sat down and he said, Tessa, it's nice to meet you. I need to do some really hard work. I'm going to have to let go of half of the executive team. My question for you is, should you be one of them? What? Me? Why would I be one of them? And he proceeded to tell me that I had a reputation for not getting along with sales. And that for him to do his work, I would need to be 100% in lockstep with sales, or I wouldn't be effective. I would actually be a detriment to what he was doing. It's the first time anyone in my whole career told me that. I had no idea. And then the light bulb went on, and I thought, oh my gosh, from the CEO on down, you don't know what's coming. And I am the person who should know people and read people the very best in the whole company, and I was very unaware of that. So I'm telling you that you are also unaware of your shortcomings. And it's really important that if you succeed and you want to continue to grow in your career, that you amp up the feedback that you get, and it's going to be very uncomfortable at first. Here's what you do. We have halfway conversations, and I want you to think about how many of these you're having with your own people. Halfway conversations. If your conversation is only halfway to the truth, expect people are only going to get 0 to 25% of what you mean. I'll go into companies, they hire me to fix things, and I will go listen in the hallways. Here's what I hear. People coming out of a meeting saying, that is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. That will never work. And that was right after somebody said in that meeting, is everybody on board? And you went, yeah, I'm on board. I have people who hire me to help them, and they say, I was promised training in this position, and I wasn't given any. Well, their manager came into them last week and said, how's it coming? Is it going well? And they said, yeah, it's going pretty good. I still don't feel like I really know what I'm doing. Is there any more training that I should have? And they go home and tell their partner, it's the worst company I've ever worked for. They didn't give me any training. Halfway conversation. We have halfway conversations with our employees. Maybe you see something wrong and you don't dare say something, and you say, I'm going to wait a little bit to see if this pops up again. And then you wait a bit and it pops up again. And you're like, oh, this is really getting to be a problem, but you don't say much, or you say a halfway conversation like, hey, make sure that you're double checking your work before it comes in. And you think that that is actually your performance plan for somebody. Halfway conversations rule the corporate world, and until we get away from them, you're going to be surprised. And my mantra is, you shouldn't have any surprises at work. Here's what, I actually want to go back a little. Well, I'll describe it. When you are coaching your people and you're having regular conversations, it feels like coaching. When you wait until year end and you're having one conversation a year with your people, it does not feel like coaching. In fact, anytime you bring up anything at all that's negative, it's going to feel punitive to your people. But the more you amp up your feedback, the more it feels like coaching and not punitive. And the more it feels not punitive, the more you can share with people. And yet, I guarantee you're avoiding the conversations and waiting. So I want you to think about how you're doing that with your people. And I want to challenge you to be more forthright about the way that you talk to your people and stop having these halfway conversations. Start coaching more. People can handle it. I mean, I go all over the world and talk to people, and I'll say, how many of you want to know how you stand with your manager? And every single person raises their hand. And then I say, how many of you know where you stand with your manager? And about 25% raise their hand. You need to know where you stand. Your people need to know where they stand. So this picture is something HR does in secret rooms behind closed doors, and some of you have been involved in this process. It's a 9-box grid, and it's talent management. And only about 3% of the company, maybe 5%, get put in a future leader box. And we're told, don't tell anybody which box they're in. Do not. And here's what I know. If you are a top performer, your manager's going to tell you, because they have enough bad news to share that if there's good news, they're going to share it. So if you're a top performer, by dang, you know it. But that top performer box gets everything. They get stock options, money, promotions, exposure to the executive team, and training. Everybody in the core employee box, those are the meets expectation people. By the way, 70% of you are meets expectations. I don't know what the hell that means. Congratulations. You're just in a box that says, I meet expectations. It could be good, it could be bad. We do nothing with those. We just hope that, they have a good manager and they'll grow. Every single one of you should be putting together a top performer plan for yourself. And the book that you get, everybody gets a copy of my book. I actually draft, what does a top performer plan look like? When we put them together for people, what is it? And it includes exposure to the level above you. Because remember, if you're not getting exposure, you're not going to get the promotion. And exposure to people seeing how you work. So sitting in on executive meetings, presenting a proposal, things like that are really important. And if there's one thing I can leave with you personally about your careers today, it would be never ever don't seek opportunities for feedback. You should be doing your own feedback 4-pack. It's in the book. I won't tell you what that is now, but go look at it. You should be doing validates all the time to make sure that you're getting the feedback that you need so that you can have greater momentum in your career. And you should be teaching your people how to do it. Because if you're relying on HR and an annual plan to do it, you're losing the opportunity to grow your career. And you're losing the opportunity in the hearts and minds of your people if you're waiting. So there's 3 things that I know, and I'll just leave you with that. People who play in the gap and solve the biggest problems for the company are the people that get ahead. Number 2, if you can't get comfortable with conflict, it will be a fatal flaw in your career and you will stall out. And number 3, if you assume good intent in the people that you work with and check your language, you will find that you can move mountains and you can have the hardest conversations in the whole world and build trust rather than break trust. And I want to leave you with those thoughts for now. There's just so much more I could talk about, but I want to leave room for just a couple of minutes of questions for any of you that have questions about the things that we talked about today. Questions about anything. Yes?
So you talked about being in the stage 4 where nobody's listening to you in the C-suite. So what would you suggest in terms of planning the gap in that role to get people to listen when they're not?
Well, a couple of things for people that are new into a stage 4. Here's just an observation. A rookie mistake in a stage 4 is that you create too much context in a meeting before you actually get to the meat of what you're asking, and people tune out. You have about 2 minutes with a senior leader to actually have them listen. So my biggest piece of advice for you is when you have the audience and the opportunity, be very clear on this. Start with, this is the ask. This is the decision I need you to make today. Then this is the cost. This is the impact. these are the risks, and then go with the questions. But don't try and show how smart you are by giving so much context and so many charts that you lose their attention span, and they'll go down a rabbit's hole if you give them too much information too soon. So you've got to be very, very specific about the ask and have your support slides in the back. That's just one of many things, but that's the one I see people make mistakes on. Good question. Other thoughts?
Hi. I'd love your thoughts in terms of being deliberate versus opportunistic as you work toward a development plan.
Well, I mean, I guess I would, that's an interesting question. I am opportunistic, and I think every single person, you are your greatest advocate. And if you think your manager is, that should be a second great advocate for you, but you should be your first great advocate. And so I would think every single person here should be an opportunist in that. You understand that your greatest leverage in a company are results, and when you get results is your greatest opportunity to ask for more. And to understand what happens at each level. There's 2 chapters dedicated to what happens at each level. Build the right skill sets so that you're prepared, because what people do is they go off their performance appraisal, and their performance appraisal is not very helpful. Maybe a manager gives them something to work on, but if you're not working on the skill set you need to be prepared for the next level, or you think that what got you rewarded in the beginning is what's going to get you rewarded in the later stages of your career, you're misguided. And so being opportunistic enough to know what to work on and when to ask for what you want, I think is an incredibly important thing, and I don't think that that's a bad thing necessarily. But you do have to be measured. What you can't do is ask for things constantly, every month asking for a promotion, a raise, a this, a that. So you do have to be measured in the way that you do it. Or, because you're senior leaders, you can get worn out by people who all they care about is me, me, me. And in fact, what I teach people to do is stop caring about you. The moment that you can understand and how to talk about what the company needs and how you're providing what the company needs, you automatically have given yourself more leverage to get what you want, instead of saying, this is what I want. This is what I can do for you, is a far better approach. Other question? Probably have time for one more. Yeah. No? Okay, we're out of time. I will be out here signing books. I'd love to answer your questions, and thank you so much for your kindness.